A farmer on an Agri-World harvests grain for the Imperial Tithe. He's never seen money. He doesn't know what money is. A Hive World factory worker receives her weekly wage and company Scrip worthless everywhere except the manufacturum store. She's trapped in debt she'll never escape. A rogue trader carries a warrant worth more than 100 planets, but he can't spend it at a tavern. So here's the question. How does money actually work in the Imperium? Because the answer is complicated and deeply, deeply broken. The Imperium doesn't have a unified currency. It doesn't have a functional banking system. It barely has an economy in the way we'd recognize one. What it has is a patchwork of feudal obligations, local currencies, barter systems, and raw coercion held together by the Administratum's bureaucratic nightmare. I'm Grimdark Economics, and today we're following money through the Imperium from the plum, lowest agri-serf to the High Lords of Terra. This is going to be a story. Let's begin. Let me introduce you to Morton. Morton is a serf on the Agri-World Harvest Prime, Sector Ultima Segmentum. He's 43 years old. He was born in the fields, he'll die in the fields. And in all his life, he's never touched a coin. Every day, Morton wakes before dawn. He walks 2 kilometers to the grain fields, massive, stretching to the horizon. Servo plows the size of hab blocks do most of the work, but they need human overseers. That's Morton. He guides the machines, clears blockages, repairs minor failures. His payment? Food, shelter. The right to exist on land owned by the planetary governor, who owns it in the Emperor's name. Morton produces approximately 4 tons of grain per week. The servo plow he oversees produces 200 tons. The district he works in, one of thousands, produces 50,000 tons weekly. And once a year, the Administratum arrives. Men in gray robes with parchment and quills. They count the grain. They calculate the tithe. Harvest Prime owes the Imperium 70% of its annual production. 70%. The remaining 30% feeds the planet's population. Barely. The tithe isn't paid in money, it's paid in kind grain, loaded onto bulk haulers, sent to orbital stations, distributed across the segmentum. It feeds Hive Worlds, Forge Worlds, Fortress Worlds. It sustains the Imperial Guard regiments fighting wars Morton will never hear about. Morton doesn't receive wages. He receives a share of the 30%, about 800 kilograms of grain per year. He trades some to the local miller for flour, trades some to the blacksmith for tools, barters some for clothing. There is no money here. There is only production, tithe, and subsistence. Now, this is the foundation of the Imperial Economy, the lowest level. Let me explain what's happening here economically. The Imperium operates on what's called a tithe system, a form of taxation in kind. This was common in feudal societies. Medieval European peasants paid their lords in grain, livestock, labor. The Imperium does the same thing, but at galactic scale. Why no money at this level? Because money requires something Agri-Worlds don't have. Money is a medium of exchange. It only works when you have multiple goods and services to trade. But on an Agri-World like Harvest Prime, there's only one product, grain. Everyone produces grain. Everyone needs grain. Money is pointless. But when that grain reaches a Hive World, everything changes. Let me introduce you to Kara. Kara works in Manufactorum Theta 7, Sublevel 94, Hive Primus, the planet Scintilla. She operates a stamping press that produces bolter shell casings, 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week. She's done this for 11 years. Her wage 47 throne Gelt per week. Finally, money. An actual currency. Throne Gelts are coins-based metal stamped with the Imperial Aquila on one side, the planetary governor's seal on the other. They're the most common currency in the Imperium, though their value varies wildly from planet to planet. And Scintilla, 47 throne Gelt buys 14 kilograms of grain imported from agri-worlds like Harvest Prime, or 8 liters of clean water, or 30 days of hab block rent in the Underhive, or 3 hours with a medikey if she's injured. But here's the thing, Kara doesn't get paid in actual coins. Not anymore. 6 years ago, Manufactorum Theta 7 switched to company Scrip. Paper chits stamped with the Manufactorum seal, they're worth 47 throne Gelt, but only at the Manufactorum store. The store sells everything Kara needs: food, water, clothes, medicine, tools. But the prices are higher than outside markets. A kilogram of grain costs 2 throne Gelt outside. Inside the Manufactorum store, 3 throne Gelt. Kara earns 47. Her expenses, food, rent, water, basic necessities, cost 51. She goes into debt. Every week. The Manufactorum offers loans at 20% interest weekly. Kara borrowed 30 throne Gelt 6 years ago to pay for her father's funeral. She's paid back 68 throne Gelt since then. She still owes 42. She will never escape this debt, and if she tries to leave, the Manufactorum calls in the Arbites. Debt bondage is legal in the Imperium. What we're seeing here is called a company town economy. This was common during early industrialization on Earth. Mining towns, factory towns, where the employer owned everything and paid in scrip only redeemable at company stores. In 19th century America, coal miners faced this exact system. The song 16 Tons has a line, "Oh my soul to the company store." That's Kara, that's millions of Hive World workers. But the Imperium's version is worse because there's no regulation, no labor laws, no minimum wage, no worker protections. The Manufactorum can charge whatever it wants, pay whatever it wants, and the Adeptus Arbites will enforce debt collection. And here's the critical thing, even though throne Gelt exists, Kara doesn't really participate in a free market. She's trapped in a coercive economic relationship that uses money as a tool of control. But let's go higher. Let's see what happens when you have real money, real wealth. Let me introduce you to Lucian Vor. Lucian is a merchant, not a petty trader, a merchant member of the Scintillan Trade Consortium, a guild that controls 70% of import and export on Scintilla and operates across 15 systems. Lucian's personal fortune, approximately 8 million throne Gelt, but that's just liquid assets. He owns 3 interplanetary cargo haulers, warehouses on 4 different planets, shares in mining operations on 2 moons, a private estate in Hive Primus Upper Spire. Lucian doesn't deal in throne Gelt anymore, not for major transactions. Throne Gelt is for peasants. Lucian deals in writs of credit. A writ of credit is a promissory note issued by the administratum or a recognized guild. It's essentially a check. It says the bearer of this writ is entitled to X amount of throne Gelt, redeemable at any administratum counting house or guild bank. Why not just carry 8 million throne Gelt, because that would require a cargo hauler just for your money. Writs solve this. They're transferable, verifiable, and critically, they work across planets. Last month, Lucian purchased a shipment of adamantium from a forge world. Cost 200,000 throne Gelt. He didn't load coins onto a ship, he handed the tech priest a writ, signed and sealed by the Scintillan Trade Consortium, verified by an administratum clerk. The tech priest took the writ to an administratum counting house on his forge world, presented it, and received 200,000 throne Gelt worth of credit, which he used to purchase raw materials from elsewhere. This is the closest thing the Imperium has to banking. Writs of credit, promissory notes, transferable debt. But here's the problem, there's no central bank, no Federal Reserve equivalent, no Imperial Mint. Each guild issues its own writs, each planetary government issues its own currency. The administratum tries to track everything, but corruption is rampant. Forged writs are common, guild collapses wipe out fortunes overnight. 3 years ago, the Milescary trade union, a major guild operating in Lucian's sector, collapsed. Their writs became worthless. Merchants holding Milescary writs lost everything. Lucian lost 400,000 throne Gelt. Now he only accepts writs from 3 guilds he trusts. And even then, he verifies every single one with an administratum notary before accepting it. This is what economists call institutional fragility. The system works until it doesn't. Trust is everything. And trust in the Imperium is always conditional. But what about trade between systems, between sectors? How does money work when you're dealing with planets that don't even use the same currency? For that, you need someone with authority that transcends local governments. You need a rogue trader. Let me introduce you to Magda Khalil. Magda is a rogue trader. She holds a warrant of trade signed by a High Lord of Terra 200 years ago and passed down through her family. That warrant grants her authority to travel beyond Imperial borders, right to claim new planets in the Emperor's name, license to trade with Xenos within limits, legal immunity from most Imperial laws, command of a private fleet. Magda's fortune is difficult to calculate. She owns a fleet of 12 void ships, including a grand cruiser, mining rights to an asteroid belt in the Coronis Expanse, trade monopolies on 5 planets, an entire moon converted into a fortress estate. If you tried to convert this to throne Gelt, you'd probably arrive at something like 3 billion, maybe more. But Magda doesn't think in throne Gelt. She thinks in commodities, trade routes, and political favors. Last year, Magda brokered a deal between a Forge World and a Hive World. The Forge World needed labor 10,000 workers for a new manufactorum complex. The Hive World had excess population and needed weapons to suppress a gang uprising. Magda arranged the exchange. She transported 10,000 conscripts from the Hive World to the Forge World. The Forge World paid her in freshly manufactured lasguns. She delivered 5,000 lasguns to the Hive World planetary governor as payment. She kept the other 5,000 and sold them to an Imperial Guard regiment 3 systems away for a writ of credit worth 2 million throne Gelt. Notice, no money changed hands until the very end. The deal was structured around barter, obligation, and leverage. This is how trade works at the highest levels. Rogue traders operate in a space where local currencies are meaningless. Throne Gelt from Planet A might not be accepted on Planet B. Guild writs are only good within their operating region. So rogue traders deal in weapons, ships, raw materials, political favors owed by governors, inquisitors, Navy admirals in Xenos locations, warp routes, resource deposits, Imperial warrants and writs issued by the highest authority. At this level, wealth isn't measured in currency, it's measured in access. Access to resources, access to power, access to people who matter. Think about the gap here. Morton, the agri-serf, has never seen money. His entire life is subsistence. Kara, the factory worker, has money, but it's a trap that keeps her enslaved. Lucian, the merchant, has wealth and writs, but they're fragile and subject to collapse. Magda, the rogue trader, operates in a realm where money is almost irrelevant. She trades in power itself. So what does this tell us about how money works in the Imperium? Imperium doesn't have an economy, not in the way we understand it. An economy requires a medium of exchange, markets where goods are traded voluntarily, price signals that reflect supply and demand, some degree of economic freedom. The Imperium has multiple incompatible currencies, coercive extraction of resources, tithes, prices set by monopolies and force, not markets. No economic freedom for 99% of the population. What the Imperium has is better described as a command economy with feudal characteristics. Resources are allocated by authority, not by markets. The tithe is the core. Every planet owes a tithe to the Imperium. This tithe is calculated by the administratum based on planetary classification, Agri-World, Forge World, Hive World, etc. Population, historical production, strategic importance, and yeah. An Agri-World might owe 70% of food production. A Forge World might owe 50% of manufactured goods. A mining world might owe 80% of raw materials. A Hive World might owe manpower, Imperial Guard regiments. This isn't negotiated, it's mandated. Planetary governors who fail to meet their tithe obligations are executed and replaced. Entire populations have been exterminatused for tithe non-compliance. Resources flow upward from the masses to the governors, from the governors to sector authorities, from sector authorities to segmentum command, from segmentum command to the High Lords of Terra. And at the very top, the High Lords control the distribution of an entire galaxy's resources. Despite controlling a galaxy's worth of resources, the Imperium is poor. Why? Because the system is catastrophically inefficient. Problem 1. No unified currency means every transaction across planets requires conversion, verification, or barter. This adds friction to every trade. Problem 2. The administratum is buried in bureaucracy. It can take decades to approve a writ. Sometimes they lose entire planets in their records. There's a famous case documented in the Dark Heresy RPG sourcebooks of a planet that paid its tithe for 300 years to the wrong segmentum because of a clerical error. The administratum only noticed when the planet rebelled out of frustration. Problem 3. Corruption is endemic. Guild masters embezzle governors' hoard resources. Administratum clerks accept bribes to alter records. Problem 4. The tithe system creates perverse incentives. Governors underreport production to reduce tithe obligations. This creates artificial scarcity. Problem 5. There's no investment in productivity. Why improve farming techniques on an agri-world when 70% goes to the tithe anyway? Innovation is punished by higher tithes. The Imperium is an economic disaster. It survives not because the system works, but because it's so massive that even catastrophic inefficiency can be absorbed. 1 trillion people starving on one planet? That's a rounding error. A sector economy collapsing? Redirect resources from elsewhere. A century-long bureaucratic delay? The Imperium has time. This is what happens when you build a galactic empire on feudal economics. You get a system that's extractive takes from the bottom, gives to the top, coercive enforced by violence, not choice, inefficient riddled with friction and corruption, stable because it's too big to fail entirely. So, how does money work in the Imperium? It depends on who you are. If you're Morton, the agri-serf, money doesn't exist. You live in a subsistence barter economy enforced by the tithe. If you're Kara, the factory worker, money exists, but it's a trap. Company Scrip and debt bondage keep you enslaved. If you're Lucian, the merchant, money is real but fragile. Writs and currencies can collapse, wiping out fortunes. If you're Magda, the rogue trader, money is almost irrelevant. You trade in power, access, and commodity. The Imperium doesn't have one economy. It has layers. And each layer operates by different rules, with different currencies, different forms of exchange. In our world, we have a global economy. Dollars, euros, yen, they're all convertible. You can trade across borders with relative ease. There are international banking systems, regulations, standards. The Imperium has none of this. And the result is a galaxy where most of humanity lives in poverty, even though the combined wealth of 1 million worlds could, theoretically, provide abundance. The resources exist, the population exists, the technology exists, but the system is so broken, so inefficient, so corrupt, that it grinds trillions of lives into dust. That's the real horror of the Imperial economy. Not that it's cruel, though it is. Not that it's unjust, though it is, but that it's unnecessary. The Imperium could be better. It just isn't. So, that's how money works in the Imperium. Or rather, how it doesn't work. I want to hear from you if you were dropped into the Imperium at a random level, agri-serf, hive worker, merchant, rogue trader. How would you try to improve your economic situation? Could you escape Kara's debt trap? Could you navigate Lucian's writ-based system? Or would you just accept subsistence like Morton? Comment your strategy, bonus points if you cite actual lore for how people have escaped these traps. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Imperial economics, hit subscribe. Thanks for watching. Remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only debt and bureaucracy.